Ladies and gentlemen, my task today is to introduce to you Mrs. Alia Quartz, just to give you a bit of an insight as to what into Mrs. Alia Quartz's profession and some of her background. Miss Alia Quartz is a therapist at the Ministry of Home Affairs. She's attached to the Guyana Police Force. She also has a degree in general psychology and a master's degree in forensic psychology. She has experience in counseling adults and adolescents in mental health. Today, our presentation will be on the importance of mental health and wellness in Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Mrs. Alia Court as she presents, as she make her presentation. Thank you.
Good morning again. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of mental health in Guyana. We're going to talk about some issues, possible issues, and we're going to talk about also that some things that we as individuals can do to improve our mental health and also maintain that mental health. So first, let's look at the definition of what mental health is. So on the screen, if you can see, mental health, it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it affects how we think, how we feel, and act, and it also helps determine how we handle stress relate to others and make choices. So mental health is important at every stage of life, from adolescence, childhood, through adulthood. So because of the fact what we think affects our behavior, and this is processed in our emotions. Yeah. So let's look at some possible issues. First, we have financing of mental health service. Out of the total of healthcare expenditures by the government health department, 1% is directed towards mental health. Of all the expenditures spent on mental health, 61% is directed toward mental health hospitals. Can I have the other slide, please? So here, this is adapted from WHO, Guyana Pan America Health Organization, and this was a study done in 2008. So the first one we have is mental health facilities. The second one we have here, can I have the others? Limited mental health facilities. The National Psychiatric Hospital, and that's in Region 6, is the only mental health hospital in Guyana, and it provides housing for chronic mental health care services at national level. There are two others, and I believe that one is Georgetown Public Hospital. And there's another one, I think it's the government office. Along with these, we have high suicide rate, as doctor said, in the first mental health program that we had in room 1, and she explored on the highest, on Guyana being the highest, and that's among women. But we also know that it's among men also, because in Guyana, they are men that are actually committing suicide. So we have the highest suicide rate in the Caribbean. And also, we could look at crime rate. And another one is poverty. Guyana is the poorest Caribbean country. We have 35% of the population living for $1 per day. And this can lead to so many other events. So think about a country that has like 8,000 people living here, and then we have 35% of this population living $1 per day. I cannot survive on $1 per day. So we have four issues that we can look at, and I said possible issues because it is an issue, all right? But research and extensive research would tell you how high and how low we are and where we are as it relates to the Caribbean countries. Can I have the next slide, please? So now we're going to look at what we should know about mental health. So over the course of your life, if you experience mental health problems, your thinking, mood, and behavior could be affected. And many factors contribute to mental health problems. And these include biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry. So this is where these things are transferred from your parent, from your grandparent, and so forth. And then we have life experiences such as trauma or abuse. And again, we're talking about Guyana. And since we have COVID, there has been an increase in abuse among women. So now, on what we should know, we should pay attention to trauma and abuse. And then last, we have family history of mental health problems. So we know what the possible issues are that we're facing in Guyana. And what we should know about mental health is that there's different factors that contribute to mental health. So a person's not necessarily born with mental illness. That can come as a result of trauma or abuse. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at some early warning signs, and these include but are not limited to what you see on the screen. So first off, what you need to know is that these can be warning signs only if the pattern of behavior changes in that individual. All right, so the first one we're going to look at is eating or sleeping too much, pulling away from other people in usual activities. Usually when somebody is suffering from depression, they would pull away themselves, discontinue activities that are regular, and so forth. Low or no energy, feeling numb, and we have having unexplained aches and pain. And this one is where you would go to a doctor and you would take screening testing for pain that you're feeling there. But as a result of the physiological aspect of it, there is no pain there, all right? Because the doctor would tell you if there is or if there isn't based on the test and scan they've done. So it all has to go back with what you're thinking. Because of the fact that you're telling yourself you have this pain, now it's processed through your emotion and your behavior or the way it's exhibited, your body is mimicking what you're thinking. So it all starts with what you think. Next slide, please. We're going to look at some more feeling helpless or hopeless. And we already know how drinking or using too much drugs more than usual can contribute to mental illness. Feeling unusually confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, upset, worried, or scared. Experiencing severe mood swings that can cause problems in relationship. Having persistent thoughts and memory you can't get out of your head. Hearing voices or believing things that are not true, and that can also be called what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, I'm just going to move on. Thinking of harming yourself and of others, and we already know this bottom one is suicidal tendencies or ideations. Moving on. So because of the fact we are living in a country that has limited mental health resources, we also have limited psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors. And let's just look at a perspective where we have the pandemic. In room 1 on Monday, we discussed problems frontline worker faces because of the pandemic. Now imagine you are a doctor. And for me, I believe frontline workers are not only doctors, they're not only nurses, they're not only psychologists, they're teachers, they're taxi drivers, anybody that is putting their life at risk daily for a bread or to provide for their family, I would consider frontline workers because you're providing a service. They're policemen and women because they have to provide a service to the public. So when we talk about mental health and why it's important in Guyana, it is important because we do not have enough facilities to help persons that are struggling with mental illnesses. And put aside that fact, also people in Guyana, we tend to look at mental illness as as something that's not important because of the fact, number one, if we're struggling with mental illness, it's hard for you to tell somebody. And why? Because the confidentiality level is not high. And even if you find that courage to go to a therapist within the organization, then you are afraid that the entire organization is going to label you as mad. All right. Another thing is our teachers as frontline workers. So we have a normal person, a normal teacher, she's performing or he's performing exceedingly well. But then again, we have the pandemic. And then this person started to think not only about their family, but their children in school because teachers have a connection with their students. All right. And then if you overthink and then you're thinking how you're going to survive the pandemic, if you're going to lose your job and where are you going to get the next month salary from to provide for your family, and whether or not you have COVID, because at one time we heard that it was some persons are asymptomatic and you do not show any signal unless you take a test, then you would know for sure if you indeed have COVID. Now, if we look at these persons, they're normal or they appear to be normal, but nobody knows what's going on inside of their head. And another example is we had a young lady that committed suicide many, many years ago, and I follow that story every day. I believe she jumped off the fall. She was wealthy, or her family was wealthy. She was doing really, really good in school. But the question still remained, why? And there were rumors speculating whether or not she was having an affair or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, nobody knew what she was thinking and nobody took the time to find out what's going on. So if we pay attention to the early warning signs, as soon as you realize or recognize that person's behavior change, then we start to look for these signs. So now we're going to talk about things that you can do for your mental health. So the first one, avoid alcohol and other drugs. Keep alcohol use to a minimum and avoid other drugs. Sometimes people use alcohol and other drugs to self-medicate, but in reality, alcohol and other drugs only aggravate problem. If you have ever seen somebody that uses excessive alcohol, I have seen so many persons, and the first thing that I'm seeing is that they're crying because alcohol is actually a depressant. It does not take what's happening in your head away. For the moment where you're not conscious, but after that, when you wake up in the morning, your problem is still there. It's up before you. Number two, get help when you need it. And this one, because in this country, again, mental health is considered taboo. And persons who recognize that they need somebody to talk to would not go and get that help. Why? Again, because of the stigma that is attached to mental health in Guyana. So for us to understand why it's important, we must understand what mental health is and the fact that it can happen to anybody at any time. So we cannot prepare ourselves enough for when something happens. We always need somebody that we can talk to. So seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And in this country, it is the opposite. We see mental illness as weakness. From the time you talk too much, somebody would say you're mad. If you're walking down the street and you have an earbud in your ears and you're actually on the phone in a conversation with somebody else and the public sees you, it appears to them as though you're talking and answering yourself, right? The first thing they're going to think, this person is mad or he or she is mad. Whether they're being funny about it or is actually serious, the thought always plays in their mind. So remember that treatment is effective and people who get appropriate care can recover from mental illness and addiction and lead full, rewarding lives. Next slide, please. So number three, learn how to deal with stress. And this is not very easy to do. So like it or not, stress is a part of your life. So you have to practice good coping skills, try 1 minute stress strategies. And these are just some things that you can do if you're faced with, let's just say, a thought that plays over and over and over and over in your mind. And why is it important to relieve yourself of that thought? Because number one, whatever we think if we continue to think about it, let's just say in this case, it's negative. So you're replaying this in your mind, and then this thought is processed through your emotions. And after that, it's manifested through your behavior. So sometimes you would walk into a room that's full of nice people, very, very nice people, very courteous people. But the minute you walk in, they recognize that something is wrong with you. Why? And nobody can tell based on your actions. If you manifest it enough, then they can come up with some options that probably he has stress or she has threat. But you do not know for sure, but it all goes back to what you're playing in your head. So it's very important for you to pay attention to what you're thinking. And when you think about what you think, there's actually a term for that, and that is known as metacognition. So even if you're thinking about your own thoughts and questioning yourself as to why am I thinking this? All right. So the first thing we need to do is number one, recognize what aggravates us. And what I mean is what aggravates your emotion. All right. So when you recognize that, number two, you must know how it's manifested through you. If you would lash out if you're angry, if you would pull aside if you're angry, whatever the case may be. And number three, develop good coping skills. How do you cope with this when it's happening? Okay, so number four, we have quiet your mind, and this is just meditating or just relax, clear your mind, and you can say a prayer, exercise, and it can improve your state of mind and outlook on life. In fact, research show that meditation may help you feel calm and enhance the effect of therapy. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at what we can do to improve our mental health. And number one is value yourself. So you treat yourself with kindness and respect and avoid self-criticism. Make time for your hobbies and favorite projects. And why is it important for you to avoid criticism? Because when somebody criticizes you, all right, they're telling you or they're doing everything to make you feel angry or to get you upset. But in reality, what does that do for you? You have stress, and then you're thinking about all the reasons why you shouldn't go to work, or you shouldn't see this person, or you should take a detour when that person is coming into your direction. So avoiding criticism helps you, in fact, because if you're constantly being aggravated when criticized, and you're constantly thinking about the person that's criticizing you, it's only damaging you and not them, because it's the result that they expect from you. So if I'm criticizing you, I would expect you to be angry. And if you give me that result, then I'm satisfied. But what is it doing to you? So that's why it's important for you to not take criticism, however shape or form it will come. Next slide, please. Number two, take care of your body. Now, we always talk about eating healthy and avoid smoking and vaping, drink plenty of water, exercise, and get enough sleep. And these are regular things that you can do for you. It's not something that you have to literally plan a schedule for. You just have to put it into your daily activities. And it's helping you. So we can start by helping our mental health, by improving our mental health, or we can wait until it's so much so that we have to get medical attention, or we have to be sent away from our family to the psychiatric hospital in Region 6. So these are just some things that you can do for you. Can I have the next slide, please? Number three, get help when you need it. Again, seeking help is a sign of strength. We talked about this before, and because of what's happening in Guyana, and I would think it's because people are not educated enough. And when I say that, I don't mean a degree in mental health or 10 subjects in mental health. What I mean is taking the time to learn about mental health, to learn how it affects people, because we all have family. Some of us have children, some of us have brother, and we want to be able to help them without taking them to the extreme, without taking them to a hospital. Then the public is going to know that, oh, my son is not mentally well, or my daughter is mentally unstable. We want to avoid that criticism. So things that we can do for us and for ourselves. And number three actually is get help when you need it. So when it's too much for you, and when you don't understand what's happening with that person, and then it's time for you to seek help. And these were adopted from the National Mental Health Association. All right, next slide, please. Ways to maintain positive mental health, and these include but are not limited to getting professional help. That's the third time we're seeing that. Connecting with other people, staying positive, getting physically active, helping others, getting enough sleep again, and like I said before, develop good coping skills. So we would have these thoughts, then we would have the display in our behavior, but what do we do after that? We allow it to happen again and again and again. So if you can identify these successfully, then you develop coping skills, a way to deal with it, not run from it, not move away from it, but a way to deal with it. Next slide. So let's look at why is mental health important. Now, in order for you to have positive mental health, and what it allows you to do is number one, realize their full potential. There are many, many, many young people that do not know what they want to do with their lives or what they want to do in the future or how they're going to contribute to their community. All right. They're so oftentimes thinking about stuff that are really negative, and then they go out and do that or perform that task or behave in that way. Number two, cope with the stresses of life. And I had a ceremony before where I told persons, where I asked the question rather, if there's anybody in the room that does not have stress in their life at all. And there were a few hands. So I said to them, well, I think you're dead because stress is what keep you alive. And stress does not mean a relationship that gone bad or marriage that gone bad or financial problem. It simply means doing something new. Let's just say you're going to apply to go to a new university. The stress of not knowing if you're going to come out successful or not, that is something that plays in your mind. The stress of not knowing if you're going to be accepted by that university, that is something that plays in you. And that's all stress is. Work productively. So if you're constantly thinking about stuff that happened 3 years ago or 2 months ago, it's going to affect your work. It's going to affect you within your social environment. It's going to affect you within your family context because nobody knows what's going on with you. And again, we do not talk about it because we already know the stigma that's attached to mental health. And the last one, make meaningful contribution to their community. Next slide, please. Oh, I believe that's the end. So this has brought us to the end of my presentation for today. It was short and I did not want to focus so much on what's happening in Guyana as it regards mental health. I just wanted to highlight what we have here right now and tell you something that you can do within yourself to better improve your mental health because it's important. It's important for you to live a successful life. It's important for you to reach self actualization. It's important for you to be who you want to be because passing through life with no purpose and you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, it's not a very, let's just say, it's not contributing to our society. It's not contributing to Guyana. So if we have, let's per se, 35% of the population that's struggling with mental health, and we already know that we have limited mental health facilities, what's next? What are we going to do with them? And then our crime rate is going to increase because of this. And then our death toll is going to increase because of this. And then we have a lot of skills, educated people, a lot of values. And where are all these things? In the graveyard. Because we refused to do anything about it or because we didn't know what to do about it. So mental health in Guyana, in everybody's life, in every individual life, is very, very important. And we should pay attention. We should try to help as much as we can. I do not believe that it's a job for a psychologist or a counselor or a scholar. I believe everybody in this room can play a part in helping people as it regards mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left for a few questions, but before we go into questioning, I'll just like to ask Ms. Kurt if there would you like to give the key points or key summaries of your presentation that you'd like to emphasize to the audience?
Okay, thank you. So like I mentioned before, this is what I need to leave with everybody that's on Zoom and everybody that's in the room. We have the responsibility in our country to help to remove the stigma from mental health because we are aware of what it does. We should not be afraid to talk about it. And when I say talk about it, we can think about persons that we would confide in to talk about whatever is it that's bothering us. And you can probably sit here or sit at home and say, you know what, nothing is bothering you. But ask yourself that question. Is it really true? Isn't there nothing at all that's bothering you? So when we talk about mental illness, it's not something that you were born with. It's not something that's going to affect the way you walk or the way you talk. But if you allow it, and like we said, whatever seed you plant, it's going to grow. And when it grows, it's going to eventually take over. So we do not want that. And another thing we need to know and understand that everybody needs help. Sometime in their life, everybody needs help. Because of the fact that we're living in a pandemic, persons are going to lash out. Persons are going to behave in a way that's not normal because not everybody could cope. And that is why I highlighted in the slides it's important for us to develop good coping skills. So all of us are tasked with helping each other as a community, as a country. All right. And if you take away nothing from the slides, just know one thing: mental illness could happen to anybody at any time. A few years ago, we did not know about the pandemic, and here we are. And there are persons that are working that cannot handle the stress of knowing whether or not they're taking COVID home to their family, if somebody is hospitalized is going to die, or what's going to happen in the next few years. Is the vaccine really working? And then the pressure is on a third dose. So think about it. If it's not the pandemic, then what else? And should we be prepared for another pandemic? And if it happens, how are we going to cope? We cannot cope alone. We need each other. We need each other's strength. We need people to talk to. We need persons to confide in. So it does not have to be me or somebody that's higher than me or somebody that controls a mental facility. It's every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is now open for any questions that you have, starting with our virtual audience. Is there any question for Ms. Kurtz? Any questions from our physical audience?
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I have two questions actually. Ms. Court, you would have mentioned that we in Guyana have very limited resources when it comes to providing services for persons who need help with their mental health and wellness. My question is there a strategic plan being put in place to address this concern and to improve the number of services that are being provided? That's my first question. My second question is, you mentioned that it's all of our responsibilities to help persons around us. It's everybody's responsibility. I have observed from many years of working in different communities and different settings and different organizations that over that period of time, over the period of about 15 years, there has been a great disconnect in communities. Everybody's minding their business. Oh, that's not my problem. That's husband and wife story. That's mother and daughter story. How do we provide some kind of community intervention to address this concern?
Okay, so the first question you asked was whether or not how do we improve the medical facilities as it relates to person. So I cannot answer your question because I do not know. Maybe we can check with the Ministry of Health because I do not work with the Ministry of Health. But I'm glad that you asked the question. So there are persons that are on Zoom, and maybe somebody is from the medical sector that can actually answer that question. As for the other question, how do we connect? How do we form that connection with members in the community? What was the question? That was the question? Good. That question I can answer. So first, what I think is that we should start with community service. Remember, well, I'm pretty young, but I know some time ago, there were in every community, there was a group of young people that would go around doing different things, whether they're engaged in football or they're engaged in cricket. Cricket was mine. I was part of that. Or whatever it is. So what are we doing? Because we know that the younger generation is what's going to push the future, so to speak. We engage them in activities that are going to bring them together, that are going to connect them, and let's just say as friends. So if you have a group of young boys playing cricket and something happens to one of them, and for some reason he's not showing up at 3 games, it's going to raise an interest in the other players. All right. So now they're going to want to know, so what's happening to Sam, or what's happening to Chandra Paul? And then somebody's going to come up with the initiative to go and check on him. So in order for us to improve or to connect back with our community, I believe we should start by providing community service. Even if we go around in t-shirts, whatever it is, and we start a cleanup campaign, or we start a Girl Scout or Boy Scout or a cricket group or a football group, connecting our youths connects us.
All right, on the community level, I'd like to say I'm a part of an international community called Community Life Competence, and there is a Guyana faction to that. That organization has been very poorly active, I should say, in terms of doing actual community work. And here I see an opportunity for us to implement our programs at a community level, because what community life competence is all about is identifying what you need, identifying the resources that you have, and using the resources that you have to resolve your concerns and to address your community problems. It's essentially developing what you just described in a strategic way, in a programmatic way, and facilitators are trained from the community in order to continue the program. So I think it would be awesome if we can have an opportunity to collaborate with the ministry and other organizations to implement programs like these.
Hi, good morning. So my question is, in Guyana, we know that a lot of people don't believe in mental health or mental illness, especially depression. So my question to you is, key points on convincing someone that there is something such as depression or others form of mental illness that affect you, but is not portrayed in a way that you would know that someone is sick. It's, it's inside, as you say, you don't know what's happening to somebody by looking at them. So how can you convince someone that there is something that can happen without showing any signs?
Okay, so to answer your question, to convince somebody, let's just go back a little. We already know that there's a stigma attached to mental illness. So if I'm going to say to anybody in this room that something is wrong with you, they're going to feel like you're attacking them. Hence, we're going to put up a defense mechanism and nothing is wrong, even if something is actually wrong. So what we want to do is, because I've highlighted on the slide some warning signs. So what you need to do is actually pay attention to that person. Let's just say, for example, the two of you are work colleagues. She knows how you operate and you know how she's operating. But for some reason, during the course of 3 weeks, there was something totally different about everything about you. You come to work late and you're usually punctual. And then she would normally go with you for coffee, but you're not interested in getting caffeine into your system. Maybe perhaps you say you're on a diet. And as it regards your work, everything just slow down. You're forgetting appointments, you're forgetting to call this person and all of that. What I'm trying to say is that because you know her pattern of behavior and you recognize and you can pinpoint that that pattern has changed and this has been occurring for 3 weeks, you can go and ask her, go ahead and ask, is everything okay? So the way you're going to address it is not a way that they're going to feel attacked. And one of the things that I like to use is there anything I can do to help? All right, so we do not want to tell them that something is wrong because, of course, I am definitely going to say, I'm okay, nothing is wrong with me. We're going to ask how we can help, or is this something you want to talk about? And of course, that person would say no. And something that I normally do is, when you're ready to talk about it, I'm here. So now you've just left the thought in that person's mind that, you know what, I can actually talk to her. I can actually confide in her. And because you said that, she's going to think about it and consider whether or not she should tell you. All right?
Okay. Nigel, here. Ms. Kirk, you would have spoke about the different variants of mental health, such as stress, depression, and anxiety. They're all underlying issues that can develop, depends on what you might be going through. But the question I'm putting to you is, what relation in terms of biological factors, in terms of a child becoming a mental health person because of their parents?
I'm sorry. Could you ask the question again? You were asking based on biological factors, what are
the likelihood in terms of biological factors of that child developing mental health issues?
So that question is a very good question, but the answer is going to be based on the research that you would do. However, the likelihood of a gene passing from a parent to a child, I would say it's a 50-50% chance for that child to develop that mental health, that mental illness from their mother, from the father. So the likelihood of a child adopting such gene from their parent, I would say it's a 50% chance that that child can perhaps inherit that gene.
If I would like to add, the evidence that there's solely a gene transmission of psychopathology from parent to child, it's still somewhat vague. There is a lot of evidence for gene environment interactions where it's not just the gene, but it's also the environment in which the person grows up in, the experiences, the early life experiences in the person's lives, the stressors during their lives, and a lot of different factors that involve in psychopathology. It's just the genetic factors of psychopathology are not as cut and dry as it sounds. Thank you.
So it's more like an environmental factor. So, for example, if you place someone in an hostile environment, the likelihood of creating hostility is very possible.
Again, there's a gene environment interaction. So it's not just the environment, it's not just the genetic factors, it's a little bit of everything.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Any more questions?
All right. So I've been a part of a lot of discussions on mental health. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've attended a lot of seminars and that sort of thing. And I've observed that there's usually a general discussion around stress, anxiety, and depression. My question is, there seems to be a lot of personality disorders among the Guyanese population. And stress, anxiety, and depression are actually symptoms of these more critical conditions. My question is, do we have enough professionals to diagnose and treat these kinds of conditions? I'm speaking from the perspective of being a borderline myself.
Thank you for your question. To answer your question, no, we do not have. I know the leading psychiatrist is Dr. Harry, and I am not sure who else there is, but I've recently Googled it, and according to Google, they have 27 persons that are capable of dealing with such personality disorders, mental disorders, as it relates to the DSM-5. in Guyana as a whole. So 27 person in a population of 800,000 people. So no, to answer your question, no.
So one suggestion I would have, because I've looked at programs in other countries, because I have challenges finding treatment for myself. There are very good programs in Canada and Australia for personality disorders, and maybe we can consider collaborating with those countries to provide some kind of virtual services for the people who have those issues.
Right. So we've just heard there aren't enough professionals. Suppose at community level, you're trying your best to see who are affected and those who have mental health issues. And you're trying your best to help. But there are situations that you alone can't do it. What other help is available so that we can get that person to even go to where the help is? Because you alone can't do it. Who can you liaison with so that, you know, a little help from the outside can be there? Because we tried many cases where people are in denial and they're doing all sorts of things, but nobody can go in, you know? So we need extra help on the outside so that we can intervene.
Thank you for your question. So I've said before that we can do community projects and so forth. So the question you're actually asking is, as a community, however, if there are instances or cases that you cannot control, who could you turn to? So this that will be in the Ministry of Health. It will be the welfare office. So I've highlighted that we have three, and that's the psychiatric hospital in Region 6. And then there is a center at Georgetown Public Hospital and the government office. So you would want to contact somebody from welfare to come and intervene because of and it's very good that you asked that question, because as a community, you will be able to highlight persons that you can, I wouldn't say control, but persons that actually have a mental illness or disorder that you cannot handle or you don't know how to handle. And because of the fact that you recognize that they're not coping well and they need to be put on to somebody that can actually handle this.
I'd like to add that there's also the mental health unit, which is national, that you can always reach out to and see if you can get some additional help.
I will definitely need a number because
so you
nobody, honestly, right now, I have a situation in my village that only I, as an individual, can step into that home. And I'm trying to seek help because I really want the person to go visit like Dr. Harry, but I need that help. So I was contemplating going to the police, but I think that's not the right route.
So Miss Alicia Solomon, who's actually in next door right now, she's from the mental health unit, and she is the new national suicide prevention coordinator or liaison. I'm sure she can try to get you some help. Be more than happy to introduce you to her as soon as we wrap up our session. And I agree, a directory of services is highly needed. In fact, Minister Anthony will be here again on Thursday to do a small wrap up. These are one of the points that we can address to him.
All right, thank you for sharing that experience with us. And I'm so happy that you are here and that we could actually help.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes more remaining. So if we don't have any more questions from the audience, just one question I'd like to ask Ms. Kurt. Only recently, a colleague of mine, his cousin, would have committed suicide. And the irony is that the main contributors to her disorder and her what I must say, her condition. I mean, it over time, over the years, it would have been happening and so on, but it has a lot to do with family, right? And the thing is that in a country like Guyana, we don't have much resources in terms of facility, in terms of health and shelter, and in terms of family support. In some areas, whereby families are the main contributors to the victim behaving in a certain way, who do they actually turn to? Because, most persons are comfortable reaching out to their families. But then if your family or the persons who are close to you are the ones who are actually inflicting the mental or they're parking the mental situation and having it out of control, how do we deal with that situation, or what strategies are in place to actually assist those types of victims?
Okay, so your question is surrounding somebody that's in the home and the family members are contributing to that person's suicidal ideation or thoughts. So within the home, there is, or you should identify somebody that you can actually talk to. And then if there's nobody that you can talk to, then there's a suicide hotline at welfare. And I was told that a lot of persons don't want to call the suicide hotline. But if you call the number, we do not know who you are. We're just listening to voice on the phone, and we can actually aid by telling you over the phone what you can do or what you shouldn't do or what you should avoid. All right. So I would encourage persons to call. And if you have a family member that you know has suicidal tendencies or has suicidal ideation, if you do not want to intervene because you're afraid that you will make the situation worse, then you can actually call that hotline number and have that person come in for counseling or just to simply talk about what's been affecting them. And maybe we can see how we can put things in place for that person in order to help them.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kurt, for your brief and informative presentation. And to the audience, thank you for your undivided attention.